talking software. The financial software available at the time was costly, rigid, and it didn't put the needs of the customer first. They agreed it could be so much better. So they decided to create a new model in the cloud, one that was built on continuous innovation, was flexible and scalable, and could evolve at the speed of business. And you know what? It worked. In 2008, Lifetime Fitness signed on as the first customer for Workday Financial Management. After that, the customers kept coming, of every size from every industry and across the globe. Now, 10 years later, the Workday community includes over 500 financial management customers, over 60 of which are public companies that are live and in production. Workday Rising has grown to over 75 financials-related sessions. Together, we're accomplishing some pretty amazing things. This year alone, we added over 300 new features, 175 of which were rolled out from brainstorms with our customers. Our community has grown to include over 1,000 consultants, and we were twice named a leader by Gartner. And the customer successes continue. Whether it's a reduction in the cost of finance, a decrease in audit fees, or an improvement in your time to close, Workday customers are seeing some pretty phenomenal results. But to this day, the stat that makes us the most happy is the one that shows how happy our customers are. Workday may have reinvented enterprise financial software, but it was our customers that helped make it happen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Workday Vice President, Financial Management Product Management, Rob Zwiebach.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for making time for this session, and welcome to the Strategy and Vision session for Workday Financials. My name is Rob Zwiebach. I'm the Vice President of Product Management for Workday Financials, and I'm very excited to spend the next hour with you talking a bit about some of the exciting things that we've been doing in Workday Financials, some of the exciting things we're going to be working toward over the next 12 or 18 months, and we're going to have a really jam-packed hour for you. We're going to start by talking a bit about just kind of what's going on in the world of finance and accounting and how Workday sees things evolving and what we're doing to help. We're going to have my colleague Dom Kellerman, the Senior Director of Product Strategy for Workday Financials, come out and give you a sneak preview of a kind of demo showcase that shows some of the key initiatives we're working on for the next 18 months or so. And that will very much bring in some of the key themes that you heard in this morning's keynote. So there's going to be a kind of a lot of focus on taking those kind of high-level themes that you all heard this morning and really applying them to the world of finance. You're then going to be able to hear from two of Workday's customers. So Brent Park from United Allergy and Mark Wooldridge from Panera are going to come out so that you can hear from your peers about some of the ways that others are using Workday Financials and some of the benefits that they're able to derive. And then I'll come back out and finish up by taking it into a little bit more detail and kind of drilling into some of the specific key capabilities and initiatives that we've enabled in Workday 31, which just went live, and then in the next release or a couple of releases, and I'll do that kind of by each solution. So taking it kind of into a little bit more detail. Now, there's going to be a lot of information, there's a lot of content, it's a pretty packed hour. You will not remember all of it. That's okay. There's not a quiz at the end, there's not a certification exam, but I do hope that if nothing else, you come away with these three things. I first of all hope that you come away with a strong sense of our commitment to continue investing in and enriching and enhancing and maturing the core financial and supply chain solutions that you, our customers, are using to run your business. We take it very seriously that we have a commitment to you to continue to deliver the strongest and most scalable and best supported solutions that are available. We take it very seriously. We know that these are mission critical systems, and we appreciate the trust that you've placed in us to help you run your business with these solutions. Second, the primacy of data. If any of you were paying attention this morning, you wouldn't be surprised to hear that that's going to be a key theme. We see a world that is awash in data, and we see more and more the ability to manage and master this immense volume of data as being the key differentiator between those who thrive, those who embody best practices, and those who don't. And finally, innovation. we see the Office of the CFO, the Finance and Accounting Department, as key drivers of innovation, and we're very focused on helping to drive innovation into the finance function. And this is not innovation for innovation's sake. This is not technology as a buzzword. This is new and evolving technologies being used to deliver true business benefit into the Office of Finance. And so at the end of the hour, we'll come back and see how we did against those three objectives. So now just to start, we're going to talk a little bit about three key forces that are really forcing shifts in the way that finance works. And so I'll start with evolving technologies. And so we're kind of going back in time a little bit to the 70s and 80s. Now, I'm certainly not going to sit here and suggest that technology started evolving in the 1970s. I mean, technology has been evolving since the first caveman created fire. But the pace of technological evolution started to really increase dramatically around this time, and it's been increasing ever since. And it's just getting faster. I think it was in the 80s that Bill Gates said something to the effect of, I think 640K should be enough for about anything. Meanwhile, most of you in the audience have about 1 million times that in your pockets right now. So clearly, technology continues to evolve, it gets faster and faster, and keeping up with this technological evolution becomes a huge challenge. As we move into the 90s and the 2000s, we start to see an evolving role for finance. We start to see finance departments being expected to play more of a strategic role. And so we start to see the demands on finance growing. And we start to see an expectation that finance is not just about kind of shepherding transactions through a normal business cycle, but really has a strategic seat at the table. It really is helping to drive the business. And coming forward to near the present day, we start to see the prevalence of external factors driving huge change. Things like regulatory changes that we've seen in very recent years around changes to lease accounting standards, changes to revenue recognition, responses to the financial crisis of 2008, the pressures of globalization. So a lot of really kind of external factors starting to shape the way that finance does its job. What's happening today is that these three forces have converged at the same time and in an unprecedentedly strong way. And so this is creating a lot of challenge. So we see the finance department trying to kind of evolve into a role that's more strategic, that's more business partner, that's less tactical, less focused on just day-to-day routine activities, but really more helping to drive the business. Meanwhile, this is kind of amidst ever-evolving technologies, including cloud, big data, and even things like blockchain, which we're starting to hear about, and which for some time looked like it may be more of a buzzword, but now really is starting to become, you know, a lot more of a kind of technology with real use cases and real applicability in the enterprise space. And again, external factors including globalization, including new business models, and new competitors. I mean, Amazon decides to get into the grocery business and everybody freaks out. They're a credible grocery competitor on day one. That's a very new phenomenon. So, what do? Research from Longitude looked into this kind of change in finance and looked into this need for the finance function to really kind of evolve from tactical to strategic, and as a result of that, to start to free up from its traditional responsibilities and be able to devote more time to more value-added activities around things like analysis, things like strategic planning. And so this research identified 4 key challenge areas that companies really need to be able to master to affect that transition. And they are resilience, intelligence, leadership, and talent. And so let's just kind of talk briefly about each of these. So resilience is really kind of speaking to an organization's ability to manage risks, to adapt, to be agile, and to manage all of this. And interestingly, less than half of finance leaders surveyed in this research said they're highly confident about managing their top risks. Now, you know, that seems a little weird. Managing risks is a very key function of the finance role, and yet more than half of the respondents aren't confident. So, you know, why is that? In the area of intelligence, we see that only 35% are making extensive use of advanced analytics. And again, you have to ask why. I mean, there's lots of rich analytic capabilities. Hopefully you all saw some of those this morning at the keynote. We have competitors who offer very rich analytic capabilities as well. There's lots and lots of technology available to do very rich reporting and analytics, yet essentially 2/3 of the respondents in the survey are not really taking advantage of this. So we have to ask why that is. In the area of leadership, so 31% of the respondents say they enjoy a seamless collaboration with their peers. Interestingly, in this research, they asked the question a few different ways, and when they actually got specific about which peers they were talking about, specifically the CIO and the CHRO, it went down to 6%. So only 6% of finance leaders surveyed in this research said that they have a seamless collaboration with their CIO and their CHRO. And finally, talent. If the finance department is really going to transition from very tactical role to being more of a strategic partner, that suggests a different set of skills, a different set of capabilities, and many finance leaders are finding it difficult to attract the right talent to effect this change. Now, as is probably, again, not a surprise, we see data as being one of the key drivers of much of this. We see the ability to manage large and ever-increasing and complex sets of data as one of the key drivers, one of the key differentiators between those who responded yes to those previous questions and those who responded no. Workday is uniquely suited to be able to provide a single, rich, cohesive set of data that helps customers to address many of these problems. And so, first of all, by having a single data model that spans the finance and HCM functions, that brings together the necessary information needed for finance and HCM and IT leaders to be able to work together. By embedding the plan, execute, and analyze concept across all of our business flows, we ensure that the relevant data is available in all aspects of the business cycle. And as you heard this morning, the acquisition of Adaptive Insights brings an industry-leading planning capability directly into the Power of One, and of course, some of the amazing reporting and analytic capabilities from Prism and from the Adaptive acquisition will bring unprecedented analytic capabilities into the hands of our users. So we're working very hard to really strengthen the plan, execute, and analyze story. And of course, we're extending that through Workday Cloud Platform. So with Workday Cloud Platform, our customers are able to very easily extend their applications in ways that may be unique to them, and to do it in ways that are essentially transparent to their users. So you can create, custom interaction pages, custom transaction pages, and as far as a user is concerned, it's just part of the same Workday solution. Now, I want to talk just a little bit about what this data is that Workday is producing and how it can be managed. And so we start with the fact that we have 31 million users, so 31 current users acting in Workday, producing worker and financial data every day. And that data is, of course, the source for a number of key things such as benchmarking, which was talked about this morning. So many of our customers are starting to opt in to the ability to compare their own results against benchmarks derived from the data that's produced across these 31 billion users. That's just the data that originates within Workday. Now, in the case of financials, there are often other data sources. And so a few years ago, we introduced Journal Connector. And Journal Connector was really designed to be able to easily pull in trial balance type data from external general ledgers. For example, for the case where a company may have subsidiaries not on Workday, but they do the consolidation in Workday. So you need to bring in external trial balances, that's fine. We'd love those subsidiaries to come onto Workday for their day-to-day financials, but they don't have to. We understand that. There are many reasons why that may not make sense, or at least may not make sense today. And so that's okay. Journal Connector is available to be able to pull in these trial balances so that all of the data can be in one place, even though some of it did not originate in Workday. Subsequent to that, With Prism Analytics, we offer the ability to pull in large volumes of operational data into the big data store that Prism offers for very rich analysis and reporting and trending. And in 2020, we'll be delivering the Accounting Center. And the Accounting Center is a very exciting new capability to basically extend the accounting engine that's already used within Workday to apply to that operational data in Prism. So in other words, if you have transaction sources outside of Workday, for example, a bank will have loan systems and deposit systems, an insurance company might have claim systems, a healthcare provider might have clinical systems, and so all of this very kind of rich, detailed transactional data from these different systems can be loaded into Prism both for reporting and analysis, using the reporting capabilities, and to be processed as journal entries and posted into Workday GL by virtue of the Accounting Center. And last, we added the ability to bring in universal data from sources such as LinkedIn through our partnership with iPass to be able to include that in various processing and analysis. And so what this does is it allows you to combine finance data with non-finance data, which was one of the key issues that drove that low response rate on the area of intelligence. It allows you to kind of bring together and manage multiple data sources well, which is one of the key issues that drove the low response rate on the question of risk. One of the key things driving risk is when data is not well synchronized, not well synthesized, and so it's difficult to detect risks because the data is in silos, basically. So having all of this rich data in a kind of highly cohesive way and being able to manage it, even when it doesn't originate within Workday, has tremendous potential. And how do we leverage that potential? Machine learning is one of the key ways. And again, you've heard some of this morning, but I'm going to try to make it a little bit more specific. So we see machine learning as a critical enabler of driving business value in Workday. We are embedding it directly in our core system, and so it's not a bolt-on, it's not some extra capability. We're embracing it in a very deep way. This highlights 3 use cases that we are working on now, but there will be many others. So in the first case, an expense receipt. So there are no standards about expense receipts. They all look different. Each vendor does things a little bit differently. We already offer the ability to take a picture of an expense receipt on your phone, and we will derive from that expense receipt the dollar amount, the price, and the date. We are investing in machine learning capabilities to improve the optical character recognition and be able to detect essentially the vendor and even the type. Now the type is tricky because it's not there on the receipt. It doesn't actually say the word dinner on your dinner receipt. But by leveraging machine learning and the ability to do very sophisticated pattern recognition, we can work toward the point where we will actually be able to tell that a receipt from a restaurant is for dinner. We'll be able to tell the restaurant name, and we will essentially be able to process the entire receipt through the expense process without any human intervention other than taking that picture. In the area of accounting entries, so this is very exciting. So Workday processes transactions in a very kind of continuous way. We generate accounting as part of the transaction process, and that's great. What we are now investing in is the ability to actually apply pattern matching to those transactions in accounting as they happen, to detect anomalies as they happen, and to surface them as they happen. So rather than holding everything off until a month-end reconciliation process, rather than waiting until the time when you're trying to get the books closed, you've got a team of accountants sitting in a conference room poring over spreadsheets, we're going to do this as it happens. It's automated, it's based on machine learning pattern recognition, and what it will do is it will highlight cases that look suspicious based on past transaction activity. It will surface those to knowledgeable users who can then specify whether a transaction is accounted, whether it looks unusual just because it's unusual but it's still correct, or whether it looks unusual because it's wrong and it needs to be corrected. And based on that human feedback, the machine learning gets smarter. Right? It's important to remember that machine learning, there's still a human component to it. There's still a feedback loop that's needed to drive the learning. And so that's how that'll work. And so as a result of that, the need to have a heavy reconciliation process at month end is much, much, much less because we're detecting and fixing issues as they happen. And then the last case I'll just illustrate is on the payment side. So again, very common that somebody might accidentally enter an extra zero on a payment. Somebody might accidentally enter a payment twice for a given supplier. And so by pattern recognition, we can detect as it happens that something looks suspicious. We can't necessarily say that it's wrong. We need a human reviewer to specify whether it's wrong or whether it's just unusual but still right. Based on that simple human interaction of yes or no, we can learn from that, we can get smarter, and we can get to the point where we're nearly at 100%. And so you'll see more and more and more of this over the coming months and years. We see this as a huge, huge imperative to be able to manage that huge volume of data and drive insights directly from it. So I am now going to welcome on stage Don Kellerman, Senior Director of Financial Management Product Strategy, and he's going to show you a showcase that illustrates some of what we've been talking about.
All right, thank you very much, everybody. Well, Rob did an excellent job talking about some of the challenges that are facing the office of the CFO today. Everything from managing risk to better leveraging information and data to run the organization. So what we want to do is we want to showcase some of the capabilities that we're currently delivering, as well as some of the things that we're thinking about for the future for our customers. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we want to help the office of the CFO continuously transform, stay ahead of the waves of change. So if we could get that down, please, and go to my mobile device. So let me start by asking, though, real quick, show of hands, how many people actually sleep with their mobile device next to them at night? That's the majority of the room. That's a lot more than I thought. Hopefully it's on your nightstand. It doesn't have its own little pillow, own little blanket. That'd be a little weird. I do the same thing, because when I wake up in the morning, grab my phone, look at emails that have come in since I've last checked, but I also get alerts and notifications from my applications. That's the exact same concept that we're going to deliver with the Workday Assistant. So if I'm a controller, when I wake up in the morning, what I could do is I could see, for example, the assistant says that my news briefing is prepared. Instead of what's going on in the world, this is what's going on within the organization. By clicking on it through natural voice and text, I'll get a response. I can see that again as a controller. All right, operational transaction activity successfully loaded overnight, great. And we're pending review of those transactions. But there's a couple alerts sitting out there, something around reconciliation for receivables. There also appears to be an anomaly with a bonus accrual. Okay, I'm going to file that away. Now, in addition to that, if you think about the role of the office of the CFO, controller, as we get closer and closer to the publication of the financial statements, what do we want to do? We want to check for certain line items to make sure nothing is necessarily out of whack that's going to result in incorrect information or delay the financials. So that's why the Workday Assistant is saying you also have new business insights. I click on them, again, a voice, text readout, letting me know that things like revenue is tracking above target. That's great, it's going in a good direction. But as a result, cost of revenue is also being impacted negatively, and margins is suffering as a little bit. But all of this looks about right. It looks within guidance. The benefit of this, for me in my role, is I didn't have to go out and search for this. I didn't have to ask anybody to send this to me. This was proactively delivered, so now, when I get into the office, I know exactly where to focus my time and my attention and my resources. So, let's fast forward and say I've gotten to the office. One of the first places I'm gonna go, this is gonna look familiar. They actually stole this from me in the keynote, that's okay. This is my controller dashboard. This is sort of my hub for all the things that are relevant and important for my persona. First thing, and Rob mentioned this, is also announced in the keynote, and you notice in the upper left, Accounting Center. The ability to leverage and manage large volumes of operational information and apply a very robust, configurable accounting rule engine, understand what has a financial impact, but just as valuable, capture and retain that business information for analysis. If I go south a little bit, anomaly detection. So actually, let me zoom in a little bit. And you saw this earlier today as well. Rob described it in rich detail about how basically, and I've lived this for many, many years, the close process is a mad rush to a compressed amount of time at period end. So what we're going to do is we're actually developing machine learning algorithms to scan and detect all accounting activity much earlier in that activity's life cycle and surfacing it then. You'll notice the x-axis is what? Days a month. So we're doing this in real time as these transactions are being applied. And so what that means to me is, for example, I could see things that were surfaced, there's no problems, maybe there was a problem, I corrected it, maybe somebody hasn't looked at it yet. In this case, if I select one of the circles, size of the circle, diameter, financial impact. And in this particular case, what we have detected is based upon previous interfaces from this particular source system, it's almost always accompanied by the region dimension. And it's even suggesting corrective action. That's fantastic. What's also great though is as a controller, I can see my accountant is all over it. James looked at it, he reviewed it, he agreed, he made that adjustment. In addition to that, if I go to the larger but lighter green circle, well in this particular case, I could see, well, remember what I learned from the assistant when I looked at it in the morning? What was one of the alerts? Bonus accruals, right? And again, in this case, James actually confirmed with a colleague and said, no, that's accurate. If you think about it, if we're generating more revenue above target, we're probably paying out more in commissions. But it's nice that I learned this and I was able to reconcile this at that particular point in time. What this is delivering for us is that continuous accounting process, something that we're all striving for. If I go to the right-hand side of the screen, Rob's going to talk more about transaction matching, account reconciliation. We already delivered capabilities around these functions in Workday 30. We're making it more robust in 31 and future releases as well. First thing I want to point out, and this is pretty exciting, I think, if you look in the upper right, account reconciliation, what do you notice? Names and faces, right? So what we are actually doing is we're enhancing the security profile. We're going to allow you to name individuals and assign resources and tasks to those individuals as well. Right now it's role-based, but designing it with our customers, quite obviously, you might want Sally to manage reconciliations for cash in these bank accounts, but Ed is going to manage reconciliation for cash in the other bank accounts. In this security paradigm, this individual named user, we're going to start delivering this in future releases around other things like the close task process as well. Second alert that I had on my mobile device in the morning was around what? It was around receivables. So by selecting in that, first of all, I'm taken to my period close work area. First thing I want to mention is the list in the upper left. Now that's just not an arbitrary list of items and tasks. Again, what we're looking to do is apply machine learning and identify items that have a higher priority based upon potential impact, severity, based upon dependencies with other tasks. Why? Because again, when we're designing this with our customers, we work with some of them that in some cases have hundreds. We talked to one customer that has over 1,000 tasks as part of their close process. So we're going to drive additional automation and focus around that as well. If you look on the right-hand side of the screen, well, okay, this is the amount that I need to amount, balance, basic dimension, combinations as well, legal entity. But one area I want to point out in particular is around suggested reconciliation items. So again, we're delivering a very robust reconciliation engine, one-to-one, many-to-one, etc. But at the same time, we're applying machine learning techniques to automatically detect and make suggestions to augment that configurable engine that we're going to be delivering as well. We foresee at some point that this will actually supplant, it'll either suggest rules or be the matching rule engine itself. And finally, last area on this particular page I want to point out, lower right. That's a new icon. You haven't seen that before. That lower right is Workday Talk. Think about the reconciliation process. Think about a number of different financial management processes and how they would benefit from having a collaborative conversation with peers and other stakeholders. So in this particular case, what the user can do, and if you'll notice, my certifier is right there in the middle. It's Jenny Green. Maybe I want to reach out to Jenny and I want to have a conversation with her specifically around those invoices, and I want to know if she has proof of performance and copies of those invoices so she could attach them. Now, as everybody understands, of course, Workday has always on audit. We wove in audit into the fabric of the entire platform. This just makes it even better in the sense that this conversation is now taking place in the context of the transaction. 6, 12 months down the road, if you or your auditors want to better understand what was the thought process that went into that particular activity, there you go. There it is. So at this point, we've demonstrated some of the capability that Rob discussed, leveraging new and innovative technologies. As a controller, I feel that we've got a pretty good handle on the transactional activity, but an additional part of my responsibility is what? It's the health and the performance of the organization. And you saw this a little bit earlier in the keynote as well. And that's why we're really excited about the delivery of stories. Stories is some very compelling reporting analytic capability that we're going to allow you to apply to your data. So, on the surface, it looks like what? Well, it looks like a scorecard, and those are pre-delivered KPIs. Not necessarily. The power of stories is it will actually go through all of the metrics in your business and predict the ones that have the biggest impact on your organization, surface those and present those. So basically what Stories is doing is it's telling you what your KPIs are before you even understand what your KPIs are. You'll also notice faces at the top, so you could assign responsibility, you could assign partnership to your metrics. What you're also going to be able to do is collaborate around your metrics. So you could actually get commentary threads, unstructured data around what's ultimately driving your organization, enrich it that way. Have conversations with colleagues and strategies to either course correct or to continue to accelerate. And then finally, what I'm also really excited about with Stories is you notice down below the why. With Stories, what you're actually going to be able to do is create root cause detection between business drivers and analytics. Let me tell you a story, and maybe it might be familiar. I was talking to a colleague, a former colleague, a friend of mine, chief accounting officer. He was literally halfway around the world during their period close. He started reviewing preliminary financial statements, and he says, I came across a line item that was obviously way out of whack. The problem was he had no recourse. He couldn't call, he couldn't email because it was the middle of the night back at headquarters. And he says, I'm looking at a number and I have no idea where to begin. Is it a cost center? Is it a region? Where is it? That's what Stories is going to solve for us. So for example, in this particular case, we're looking at revenue. It's being impacted favorably by what? By a particular region, by a revenue category, even a service product line. Same thing for cost of revenue. If I go to profitability, think about the power of being able to pinpoint things like industry, revenue items, customers that impact your organization around profitability, and that's what Stories is going to deliver to us. Finally, the last area I'll talk about is, well, this is very compelling as it relates to managing information and data. At the end of the day, I'm a finance guy, we're finance and accounting people. What do we like to do with our data? We like to get our hands on it, we like to manipulate it, format it, and model against it. And that's why last year you heard about the release of worksheets. I believe most of us are familiar with worksheets. Those that aren't, quite obviously, that familiar Excel metaphor that you see, that UI, where you could basically lay out your financial information, do ad hoc analysis, apply your Excel formulas, pivot tables, etc. But what's the problem with Excel? You're taking data out, now it's stale, now it's not secure, now you have to worry about things like formulas, etc. Well, we solve for that with worksheets because, of course, worksheets is literally sitting within the system of record. It's retrieving and pulling live information. You're going through a period close, you're doing analysis, somebody makes an adjustment somewhere, somebody slips in something. You don't have to copy, paste, recreate. You simply click a button. Because it's within the financial management system of record, guess what? You apply security to it and you collaborate to it. And then finally, you notice the comment box. The ability to have conversations, to annotate against this. Worksheets was really well received by our customer community, but some of the early feedback we got, great, I can't necessarily hand this to an executive. I need a presentation tool to put it in. So, you heard in the keynote, and something we're also very excited about, is something we call live sheets. Basically, that familiar desktop presentation tool, put your charts, put your graphs, put all your annotation in there. But the linkages to the information is live. Again, if you're rushing to provide that board package, that QBR, but again, you're worried about the information, it's connected at all times, same concept with sharing information, annotating, etc. So live sheets is something that we're also really bullish on. Now, we could switch over, Ed, back to the PowerPoint presentation that we had. Fantastic. Really what we wanted to drive home is we are constantly looking at innovative ways to drive predictability, drive accountability, put controls in place, reduce risk, and drive automation as it relates to technology and leveraging information. You've heard enough from Rob and myself at this point, though. What we thought would be beneficial is if you had an opportunity to learn from the experiences of your peers and colleagues. Rob mentioned we have a couple customers. And let's start around information, reporting analysis, and Prism. So what I'd like to do, and please help me out, bring to stage my friend, Brent, from Untitled Chapter. There we go. Thanks for joining us, Brent. Let me get my notes. Brent, you've got a really interesting business there. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what United Allergy does?
Sure. So United Allergy is a healthcare services company, and what we do is partner with primary care physicians and put a tech in their office and do allergy testing for environmental allergens and mixed custom immunotherapy. We're across 20 states with over 550 locations.
Okay, fantastic. And tell us a little bit about your journey. What drove you to evaluate and go through a selection process for a new ERP system, and in the same breath, what ultimately led you to Workday?
Sure. So we had different systems for our line level activity data, for our sales opportunity data, for our HR information system data, for our financials, and for our recruiting data. So 5 or 6 different systems. Luckily for us, several of those systems contracts were out there right about the same time. So we thought we would take this opportunity to try to centralize into a more singular source. And as we went through the RFP process, we were very impressed with Workday's really diving into what our company did and understanding our business model. So we decided to go with Workday.
Okay, fantastic. And what also led you to think about leveraging and ultimately choose and go with Prism as well?
Yeah, for us, as a smaller organization, and I know nobody in the room is going to be able to relate to this at all, but we have a very lean analytics team. So we struggled on a day-to-day basis with manual Excel reports for daily updates to our operational sales, collections, and other departmental leaders and our executive team as well. So we had our analytics team spending the majority of their time doing these repeated reporting tasks rather than really trying to find those insights that's going to help us drive business forward. So as a result, we saw Prism as an opportunity to pull in all those external data sources, intermingle them with the Workday data that was all a little bit more centralized than it had been before, and really start automating those repeated tasks. There's no more items in our leaders' inboxes. There's no more 40-50% of our analyst time spent creating them. And our field leadership, which is the majority of our leadership team, we're mostly mobile-based. So that was a benefit to them as well. It allowed them to really own their data more.
Okay. You talked about how you're a lean enterprise, and Rob also mentioned there's plenty of analytical tools out there. I know in my former career I had fun with ETLs and data warehouses, and on the surface, I think somebody might, well, what's the difference in terms of the ownership experience or usability between Prism and all the other tools or technologies that I have experience with? Can you talk, you said yourself you're a lean shop.
Mm-hmm.
So how has Prism, I guess, basically enabled you to drive those analytics that you were talking about?
So really what it's done is allow us to be an organization where data is driving every meeting at this point. Instead of getting an email from the analyst saying, here's what your numbers are, people get to access their data on their timetables, and they own their data. So it's no longer, well, finance says I'm behind, it's I'm behind. So, or I'm ahead, which is what we always want to hear. But that ownership and that understanding that this is the data, this is here, this is everyone's data, not just what finance tells us, is really something that we've seen as a benefit.
So financial information, there's much more important or equally important information in the organization besides just finance. What are some of the other data elements that you're capturing as part of your organization?
Sure. So we are really trying to drive in a lot of different metrics. We talked about operational metrics a little bit earlier, but we, our collections team is using this to track our collections trends, to track our AR trends, and to really dive in. As a healthcare organization, we keep an eye on the insurance carriers and trends that are happening there. So our denial rates increasing with certain carriers. Do we need to take a look at that from a payer relations standpoint? From the operational side, we're pulling in manual data from our planning process to put goals in so we can track against goals and forecasts and planning. We also use this to track some of our KPI trending, looking at our treatment rate of our patients who are tested and that compliance rate of those patients, which is so fundamentally important to us. We get to really keep a very close and drillable eye on how compliant are our patients and what's driving that non-compliance. Is it a worker? Can we dive into that worker and see, well, have they taken a lot of time off lately? We can really jump around into different areas. It's also allowed us to look at an executive level at all of our KPIs. So our executive team is really looking into each of those things, and they're able to dive into any aspect of it they want to. So really drilling in and slicing the data to look for those trends.
So now that you have the data, is there any anecdotal stories that you could share about, holy cow, now that we could see this, I had no idea this was going on, and we either need to fix it or we need to change course in some way?
Yeah, so I'm going to jump back to that patient compliance data. Again, it's what drives our business. Obviously, our business is healthcare. We want to improve as many lives as possible. And when we start seeing that this is falling off in certain areas, it was very hard to identify what the issue was before. And so now, with using Prism and being able to connect that external data, which shows us where patient compliance is, to both our locations and our workers, we could identify some trends that were going on and really correct some actions in some of our standard spiel of, hey, this is why it's important to keep doing this. So we were able to correct a little bit based on some patient demographics we saw, and we were able to bump our compliance up in some specific areas.
That's great. And second to last question, has this changed the way your organization looks at and uses data at all?
It's made our meetings much more focused. Like I said, everybody gets to own their data. So when we go in, it's knowing the data is correct. It's no longer one person pulled their data, the other person pulled their data, and now the numbers are a little bit different, and now that's what the meeting's about.
Yeah.
So it's made it a lot more focused in our meetings.
Fantastic. Last question. If there was any advice or tidbits that you would offer your peers and colleagues that might help them with maximize their Workday investment,
Yeah,
what would that be?
absolutely. So if you're looking at Prism, I'd say just really create a plan for what you want out of it. You can go a few different routes when you're going through that implementation. We chose to go a route that is taking us longer, because we're still in the implementation process, to be clear. But it's taken us longer, but it's given our analysts the ownership of, I get to create all of this, and we can make those tweaks in the future that we want to make. Whereas you can go the other route of having it created for you, which is a little bit faster, but I'm a big fan of the ownership. So
Right on. I believe you have a session tomorrow.
Yes, I
Want
am.
to plug your session?
Why not?
You've earned the right.
So I'm kind of going to dive more deeply into this topic tomorrow at 1 o'clock, just talking about how we're modernizing our BI through the Prism process. So I don't know where it is, but
Standing room only. We'll turn out
Let's
for
hope.
you. Right.
All right.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
man.
That was great. Fantastic. All right. Lots of goodness there. So now that we, again, have an opportunity to hear from others as it relates to planning and analytics, one of the other things that Rob and I want to focus on, thought it was important, is ultimately how are we constantly innovating within our roles and responsibilities? How are we either leveraging technology or new trends in the marketplace? And again, everybody, I use the word transformation. Transformation means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I would count that as a buzzword as well. But fortunately for us, we have Mark Wooldridge from Panera, who's going to talk about what it means to him and his organization. Welcome, Mark. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon.
This is supposed to be a fireside chat, and I thought, well, first of all, there's absolutely no fire, and the last thing I think anybody in Vegas would want would be fire at this particular time. But tell us a little bit about Panera.
Sure, so hopefully we have a host of loyal fans out here at
Yeah.
Panera, right?
Yeah.
For those maybe not as familiar with Panera, we're a baker cafe concept, about 2,000 locations. Half of those are company owned, the other half franchise operated. On the the company side, we've got roughly 60,000 or so associates that are great payroll teams paying every bi-weekly cycle.
Yeah.
That's a little bit about Panera.
Okay, great. And it is I love your soups. Anyway, talk to us a little bit about your much larger organization, of course, hospitality. What drove you to get to a point where, you know what, we have to evaluate our solution, and Workday is the one for us?
Sure. So I'm sure like others that have been before us in this journey, we were on a very old ERP. If you analogize it by a car, we were probably nearing 300,000 miles or so. Wheels are starting to wobble, the oil's starting to leak, and it was time to go shopping. So we went and looked for cloud-based solutions, Workday obviously being one of those. And our team did a very thorough functional review. That assessment came back and could it do this, could it do that, was fairly comparable to the platforms we're looking at. The power of one was certainly something we heard a lot during and being an HCM payroll customer for a few years. That was something that resonated with us, and looking back, we probably underestimated that a bit, because now being live for a year on financials and the connectivity of HCM back through payroll and watching the ability within our close process, within our reporting, what it meant for our managers to have one common system.
Yeah, could you drill down on that actually? Because again, going back, Power of One does mean a lot of different things based upon the organization and the problems we're trying to solve. But what did the Power of One, financial management, human capital management, one system mean to Panera?
Sure. So we had our accountants behind the scenes. If you had a separate HCM, payroll, and ERP, there were a number of audit checks that were going just to data validity more so than anything. That as well as our operators. They're getting these separate P&Ls that are emailed to them, and they're getting it within their system, within Workday for HCM, one common system. For an operator that is asked to do a lot within our cafes, it's a very complex environment. To make it the ease of use to go into one system, to be able to see their P&Ls, to be able to see their labor, to make time adjustments, I mean, that's meaningful. And at the end of the day, it's really about our operators for Panera. And that really has been a big difference for us.
I'm not, maybe you want to expand upon this story, but I was with a peer or colleague who actually did the deployment. You went live, and later on, I was with that colleague. We went into a Panera, just walked up, and without any context, went to the manager and said, "Can I see your P&L?" And the manager, of course, had a blank stare and was thinking about tapping the button, the panic button underneath But do you really drive P&L accountability down to the store level?
We really do. If you think in terms of, even at the compensation level for our managers, they're compensated off store profit. So they own that P&L. It means something. So if their accruals are off a bit, or if they're overcharged on something, that means something. All of that really comes down to their bottom line. So, we really need to put the data in their hands in an accurate, timely manner.
Okay. Part of the innovation conversation that we're hoping you could talk about from your experience, you've been live for a year, so you've gone through a few releases. Feedback we get from customers is sometimes it can be challenging to keep pace with how much product or how much capabilities that we push out. what are some of the techniques that you've employed at Panera to make sure ultimately at the end of the day, when that release comes at you, that you're prepared for it?
Yeah, what I'd say is we partner with Workday understanding roadmap, right? So the roadmap within financials and understanding both financials and HCM. So we come to Rising, we make sure that we're on community as much as we can to understand what's that next 18 to 24 months look like. So we're not surprised when we get to the next biannual update. When we get to the biannual update, we have functional teams that digest what's going to occur within their world, right? So it's not some corporate office team that's coming in. It's really the person that does cash, the person that does AR. They're understanding what's going on. They're doing the test cases and making sure that what's occurring in their world, how it's going to change, how they need to share it with their teams, how they need to share it with their customers that are using our data. They really understand it. So, the two releases that we've gone through have been fairly seamless so far. Knock on wood.
Yeah, knock on wood. One of the other things that we want to talk about as it relates to innovation is how the office of the CFO within your business has potentially evolved, either through external factors or things like technology. What would you want to share with the group?
Yeah, I would say if we go down the innovation path, right? As a company in a highly competitive industry, we are required to stay ahead of our competitors to succeed, right? Differentiation is the key for Panera. That doesn't just happen on the front line, right? That has to happen behind the scenes as well. So culturally, we ask our entire organization to be innovative, to be thought leaders. So the accountants that work in our team, are asked to get accurate P&L information out in a timely manner, but they're also asked at the same time, how can you do it more efficient? How can you do it more effective? Putting Workday Financials in a year ago was a step change for us, right? Really the business process framework, the process changes that we were able to evolve around it. We were able to shave nearly 3 days of our close process off. So now if you're the office of the CFO, you're offering the organization data for close purposes 3 days earlier. And for us to be able to go out, put plans of action in place for opportunities in our P&L, to be able to monitor those on a more real-time basis, to be able to see the change effectuated within our organization, as we go through the next close cycle and look back and say, glad we saw it, glad we made some changes, and here we go. And you can deploy those out to the organization. It's been a meaningful impact to the group.
And I've had a few conversations with you. You're forward-thinking and looking finance executive. When you think about machine learning, artificial intelligence, and RPA, robotic process automation, are there particular areas within your business that you instantly go right there for these reasons?
Yeah, I'd say there's probably more to learn than I can comprehend. I was excited to see Rob's examples here for T&E and a few others. We've worked with our banking partners to look at areas like cash applications and how do we understand better data from our banks and leverage Workday in that capacity. What I think is important is, and I think what's exciting from a controllership standpoint, is that we have a partner who's investing the technology and embedding it into the software we use, right? So whether it's the T&E example that Rob shared, we can partner alongside. We'll raise our hand quick and offer the ability to run use cases through our environment and to make sure that we truly understand. But from a controllership, from a longer term perspective, I'd say we really have to watch the mix of our associates, right? If we have more data entry and processing data today, I think we'll look to in the near, let's say mid to future, that we'll have more analysis, right? So we'll have to watch the skill sets of the team as well.
Okay, great. And I'm going to end it the same way I ended it with Brent a little earlier. Any tips, techniques, parting words you would have for your colleagues?
Sure. So I would treat Workday as a partner, right? As a true, we go through these brainstorming sessions for innovation and we identify challenges. Our business tends to change a lot. And Workday listens, right? We were on a competitor prior to Workday, and we just didn't get that partnership, right? Where we really had. So I would leverage your relationships with Workday, understand who the product managers are in key areas, and take advantage of that and really brainstorm, really engage yourself within community, engage yourself with other customers, and really try to, as a community here, drive this software forward, right? And it has its gaps, it has its benefits, but we can all as a community really push this forward. Right? That I'm excited about, and I hope everyone else is.
Great, fantastic. Mark, that was perfect. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Two fantastic representatives of their brand. Again, it takes a little bit of courage to get up in front of a room full of hundreds of people. Once again, can we thank Brett and Mark for their time? hope everybody walked away a little bit smarter. I'm going to turn it back over to Rob, and he's going to take us home.
Okay, so hopefully that was useful for you to hear from your peers. And I'm just now going to go over a little bit about where we are today, what we've done in Workday 31, some of the key highlights. So one important point to emphasize is that we have delivered 175 brainstorms. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we take your feedback very seriously. We focus a lot of our investment on addressing the specific issues that you've raised. We will continue to do so. Now, global requirements is an area that we invest in very heavily. We already support a large number of countries. We, of course, have many customers operating in many countries beyond these, but we will continue to invest in delivering features that streamline the implementation for many countries. In Workday 31, we address requirements to support China, Indonesia, and others, and to support headquarters based in Japan. So we had already had capabilities for Japanese-based subsidiaries. We've now delivered support for Japan-based headquarters, and we'll continue to do so going forward through 32 and 33. We continue to prioritize some of our investment for very specific strategic industries for us. Healthcare being one very important strategic industry. We're very heavily focused a lot of our investment in our supply chain area around procurement and inventory on addressing the requirements of healthcare, including things like back orders and including a lot of enhancements to mobile inventory support. We prioritize education and government as well. We've made significant investments in our awards process, in our grants module, and we will also continue to invest where relevant in our endowments capability and, of course, in commitment accounting. In financial services, we've made significant improvements in our allocation process. One great success story there is one of our large insurance customers has seen their month-end allocation flow cut in half in terms of processing time while adding additional use cases that they were never able to do in their legacy system. So moving from legacy to Workday has enabled them to save 50% of the processing time and to add additional use cases. And in the area of professional services, we continue to invest to support things like transfer pricing for intercompany projects and more complex requirements around staffing. And now I'll just go through each of the 6 or so core kind of solutions that comprise the full footprint of our financial and supply chain, starting with record to report. Now, in the record to report area, as you've hopefully already got a good sense, we're making significant investments in reconciliation capabilities, including transaction matching, including account certification, and we will continue to do that. We think that there's huge benefit to being able to do consolidation, reconciliation, and period close in the same system in which you manage your core financials. It's a very strong power of one story. Rather than pushing huge data sets out to niche solutions to support things like reconciliation, far better to do it directly within your core financials. We've delivered key capabilities for that in Workday 31, and we have a clear roadmap for 32 and 33 and beyond, culminating in some of what Dom showed in the showcase. In the procure to pay area, we are working toward intelligent work queues, leveraging machine learning to route work like invoices to the relevant people based on bandwidth and based on past experience. We've also rolled out support for multiple companies on purchase orders and multiple companies on requisitions is coming soon. That may sound like a kind of low-level feature. It's actually very significant because what it allows is it allows you to have decentralized requisitioning but centralized procurement, for example, even across country borders, across business borders, be able to incur liability centrally, but have the expense distributed among all the different companies that may incur it. So, very sophisticated capability for intercompany processing. In the expense to reimburse area, we've invested a significant amount of effort in streamlining our look and feel and in bringing the mobile user experience together with desktop. Now, I do have to warn you that unfortunately, this actually is not in Workday 31 as it went live a couple weeks ago. We're still working on finalizing this. It's still yet to be delivered. Some of you are no doubt already aware of that. We will cover that in more detail in the expenses detail session on Thursday. We're working very hard to get this out very soon because the feedback we've gotten on it is tremendous. There's huge interest in it and it looks great. Now, At the same time, we are also investing in natural language interface for expenses. And here's a simple video. This is an example of a Slack interface for being able to record an expense simply by typing in what you've done. So Dom actually did this, create expense for a lunch with me. I let him do the expensing so I could approve it. Don't tell my boss. So we take a photo of the receipt. The entire process is done, and the expenses application is smart enough to recognize the restaurant name from the text that Dom typed in. So again, we're looking at ways of streamlining the expense flow and basically getting it out of the process of having to key in a lot of data and really being able to just streamline the entire process and again, do the whole thing from your phone. Now in the inventory area, it's stock to replenish, so again, sticking with mobile. We invest heavily in mobile where it makes sense, certainly in expenses and certainly in inventory because factory workers want to be able to work as close to hands-free as possible. We've done a lot in Workday 31 around mobile put away, and we'll continue to invest in mobile capabilities going forward. We're also investing significantly in streamlining the item master, the management of items, and in consigned inventory. And in the contract to cash area, we're investing heavily in being able to support more and more complex pricing, contract models, billing models. We're seeing tremendous moves toward more complexity around contract requirements. We're also looking at leveraging the Workday Cloud Platform to be able to support billing and pricing requirements that may be unique to one specific customer. So by providing relevant services, our customers can leverage Workday Cloud Platform for their own unique billing and pricing requirements. And in the area of staff to deliver, the improved interface for resourcing and for staffing projects is shown here. And so it's a very nice streamlined way to be able to see availability, fit based on skills. Going forward, we're going to be leveraging machine learning to be able to do better staffing recommendations and again, to kind of streamline and automate the entire process. So I apologize for going fast there, we're just about out of time. I do strongly encourage you to attend any of the recommended sessions in one of the areas that you are interested in. There will be a lot more detailed focus into each of these specific areas. I hope then that if we just revisit this very quickly, we've convinced you that our commitment to investing in your current solutions is very strong. The primacy of data is very central to everything that we're working on. And of course, we are deeply committed to continuing to innovate and to provide innovation to you. And so on that note, I will just say thank you for those of you who are currently running your business on Workday. We appreciate you being our customers. For those of you who are considering Workday, thank you for your consideration. For all of you, thank you very much for your time. I hope this was useful. I hope you have a great rest of the Rising Conference and have a great Workday. Thank you.